My name is Ambar Kaylee, and I am 31. 2 weeks before my wedding, my past lit up my phone like a match at a gas leak. Ambar, please hear me out. What happened that night wasn't what you think. If you don't let me explain, it could cost you everything again. I stared at Marissa Lane's message until the words flattened into shapes, until my eyes watered and my chest prickled the way it had 6 years ago when her name went from promise to poison. I deleted the text. Then I put the phone down, like it might bite. The invitation boxes were open on the kitchen island, envelopes fanned in tidy rows. I'd been counting RSVP cards out loud, 57, 58, when the name Marissa climbed out of a dead year and perched on my screen like a crow. I hadn't said that name aloud in 6 years. Not since the night I found her in Ethan's truck. Not since my engagement ring. 8 months of double shifts and skipped lunches, flashed on the wrong hand in the wrong place under the wrong moon. Back then, I was 25 and starved for meaning. Marissa was a photographer with feral eyes. She'd point her lens at a rusted water tower and find a cathedral. With her, alleyways felt like venues, broken light like stage design. We were going to marry at my father's cabin in the Pines, an hour outside Tacoma, the same planked porch where he said my mother once danced in the rain. The place had a gravity to it, rough-cut beams, hand-hewn by my grandfather, a history you could feel if you pressed your palm to the wall. My father, Raymond, called it legacy. I thought choosing the cabin for the wedding might finally translate me into his language. The rehearsal dinner glowed like a photograph, candles in mason jars, my grandmother's dress waiting in a cedar garment bag, the caterers, a sweet couple with silver hair, promising pies that tasted like autumn itself. Even Raymond softened. He lifted a glass and told a story about my mother that didn't end in a warning. For 1 hour and 14 minutes, I believed I was inside a life I could keep. Later, I slipped outside to grab a list I'd left in my car. The forest held its breath. Somewhere beyond the porch, a pickup door opened and closed. I rounded the trunk, already smiling, already forming the sentence. You won't believe how perfect the seating chart finally. Moonlight found chrome. The truck was half swallowed by the pines, but not enough to swallow what I saw. Ethan, my older brother, the first draft of our father. Broader, blunter, always a little out of reach. And Marissa, still wearing my ring, her hands tangled where my heart should have been. It wasn't a kiss. It was the sort of intimacy that doesn't confuse easily. 30 seconds, maybe less. I watched the latticework of my future sag under an invisible weight and then break with a quiet, hideous sound only I heard. I didn't say a word. I walked back to the porch. I sat until dawn sculpted the porch rail into something I didn't recognize. I called off the wedding before the coffee finished percolating. I moved to Seattle the next week and made a company out of the ruined proof that I could endure. I didn't speak to anyone in my family except for brittle holiday texts that sounded like transliterations from a dead language. 6 years is a long time to hold your breath. It's also not. Hey! Caleb leaned into the doorway, scrub top rumpled and hair still damp from a shower after the night shift. He's an ER nurse and a better man than anything I had dared to want when I met him. You're not counting anymore. I realized my fingers were shaking. Old ghost, I said, which was a coward's way of saying Marissa. Caleb stepped in, the good kind of gravity. Do you want me to read it? I deleted it. I tried to smile. So, no. He watched me, reading the things I wasn't letting my face carry. If a text can knock you sideways after 6 years, he said gently, it's not closure, it's distance pretending to be closure. I loved him for saying it and hated him for being right. She said it could cost me everything again, I admitted, the words catching on my teeth. Caleb exhaled. Then meet her, on your terms, somewhere public, and don't go alone. My terms, I repeated, because saying it made me feel less like a creature led by an old leash. Talia can come. Talia is my business partner, a human lie detector with a deadpan delivery and the patience of a saint's convention. If I had to sit across from the woman who broke me, I wanted Talia there to catch the seams. We chose the Metropolitan, an upscale bar with dim corners and clean sightlines. Talia arrived first, typing notes into a phone she wasn't pretending not to use. I picked a back table facing the entrance and asked myself why we were here when the story had already ended. Marissa walked in looking like a photograph you almost recognized. Thinner, hair shorter and darker, her edges sanded down to something nervy. Time had pressed its thumb into her face. She moved with the old stride anyway, as if rooms were sets and she refused to be an extra. Then I saw the necklace. A silver pendant with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious. It was my mother's. It had gone missing during the aftermath at the cabin, another loss I chalked up to chaos. Seeing it against Marissa's collarbone made the room tilt. She sat without preamble. "You hate me," she said, each word placed carefully, "and you have reasons. But what you saw that night was staged. If you don't let me explain, Raymond takes you down with him, again." "Staged," I repeated, my voice flat. "Theatrical cheating, is that what we're calling it?" Talia's knee bumped mine. "Watch her tone," our old signal. Marissa's eyes flicked to the pendant, as if she knew it was an accomplice. 3 weeks before the wedding, your father came to me. He told me he'd been cycling money through your startup to paper over problems at his construction company. He said you'd sign things without realizing what they were. If the wrong eyes looked, you'd be the one who went down. He wanted you gone, out of Tacoma, away from the books, so you wouldn't stumble into it. She swallowed. He asked me to make sure you left. For good. I laughed then, a short, ugly sound. And naturally, the ethical solution was to climb into Ethan's truck. He told me to, she said, voice steadying. Your father needed you to hate me in a way you couldn't undo. With Ethan, it would be unforgivable. You'd leave. You wouldn't listen if I ever tried to warn you. Talia's chair creaked as she leaned forward, interest sharpening into something like belief. I hated that. Why the necklace? I asked. That belonged to my mother. Raymond gave it to me at the rehearsal dinner, Marissa said, eyes flicking to the pendant again. Said I was becoming family and should have something that proved it. When everything blew up, he demanded it back. I kept it. A wry breath. Insurance. Or a reminder. Reminder of what? I wanted to snatch it off her throat. Of how you performed heartbreak convincingly enough to shatter a person? Of what killed my mother, she said. The table went very quiet. My mother died 12 years ago on one of your father's job sites. There was a lawsuit, and it disappeared for pennies. She turned to Talia, as if deputizing her to judge. When I helped Ambar with bookkeeping, I found old files, links between his company and the site, purchase orders that didn't match, inspections that looked cleaner than they should. I confronted Raymond 3 weeks before the wedding. He told me to walk away, or he'd make sure Ambar never looked in those files again, permanently. I felt the room recede, like I'd stepped off a dock and was only now noticing the water was black. You expect me to believe my father staged my humiliation to save himself? I expect you to ask him why Ethan had to take a fall, she said, softer now. And I expect you to ask what really happened to your mother's construction lawsuit, the one you were never told about. My mother died in a car accident, I said automatically. Marissa's face said, Are you sure? Without being unkind. The bartender drifted near. Talia waved him off with a glance. My thoughts were noise, metal scraping metal. Marissa stood. I know you're getting married. I'm not here to take anything from you. Her voice caught. The pendant flashed. I did what I did because I thought it was the only way to keep you alive. Alive from what? I whispered. From your father, she said, and left me with the sentence like a glass on the table we hadn't paid for. On the ride home, the city moved around us like a stage set changing scenes. Talia didn't speak until we hit a red light on 8th. She believes what she said, Talia murmured, or she deserves an Oscar. The detail density, the pendant, the timing, none of it felt improvised. She wore my mother's necklace, I said, because that hurt less than... She said my father might have killed a woman. Then ask him about it, Talia said. Ask him about the money, about Ethan, about the lawsuit you weren't told existed. At home, Caleb looked up from the couch, eyes bright with questions he didn't force into sentences. I kissed his temple like an apology and tasted salt that might have been mine. I think I have to drive to Tacoma, I said. Then I'll make coffee, he replied, and in that sentence was the reason I had a wedding to lose. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the invitation list, my grandmother's dress in its cedar bag upstairs, and the ghost of a necklace glittering where my memory insisted my mother's throat should be. Dawn came on like an interrogation lamp. I picked up my keys. It was time to look my father in the eye and ask what exactly his love had cost. When I reached Raymond Cayley Construction, the sign looked smaller than I remembered. The red paint peeling, the metal warped by sun and salt air. Tacoma's industrial district had always smelled like sawdust and regret. I parked outside the warehouse office, heart thudding like it was trying to dig its way out. Inside, nothing had changed since I was 17 and helping with summer paperwork, blueprints layered like fossils across the walls, coffee rings etched into the desk like constellations. My father sat behind it, silver hair slicked back, reading a file through bifocals he didn't need but wore because they made him look official. He looked up, eyes narrowing, then leaning back slowly, his voice a familiar mixture of charm and warning. Well, my prodigal daughter returns. Let me guess. You need money or forgiveness? I shut the door quietly behind me. Neither, I said. I need the truth. He laughed, a sound that didn't reach his eyes. You sound like a cop. I met Marissa last night, I said. The smile slipped off his face. I watched the calculation flicker across his expression, a chess move he thought he'd retired years ago. He gestured toward his chair across from him. You shouldn't waste your time entertaining liars. I didn't, I said. She told me about the money, Dad, about you using my company, about the accident, about her mother. His knuckles tightened around a pen. That woman was always dramatic. You think I'd risk our family's name over a few bookkeeping mistakes? Bookkeeping mistakes don't get people killed, I said. She showed me files, transactions. You moved money through my startup to cover your own trails. And if that's true, you made me sign the papers that would have put me in prison. For a moment, I saw something rare, fear. Then it hardened back into authority. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the equipment yard, and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass. He didn't offer me one. You want honesty? He said finally. Fine. I moved some numbers. Nothing illegal. Just creative math to keep this business alive when the state tried to gut our contracts. You would have been fine if you'd stayed in your lane. My lane? I repeated. You mean architecture? The thing you mocked every Christmas for not being real work? Exactly. His voice cracked sharp. You walked away from the business, from this family. Don't act like a saint now. I took a step closer, shaking but not retreating. Why would you ever give Marissa Mom's necklace if she wasn't family to you? Why would you? He turned sharply, face reddening. Because I thought she'd be one of us, until she started digging where she shouldn't. So you destroyed her? I protected us, his voice boomed through the walls. She was asking questions about a job site that could have bankrupted us, about safety reports that were none of her concern. She didn't know what she was dealing with. He stared at me for a long, heavy second, then said quietly, You think I'd let you marry a woman who was ready to destroy what I built with my bare hands? My breath hitched. You covered up her mother's death, didn't you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he downed the whiskey, wiped his mouth with his thumb, and said, Her mother died in an accident. Accidents happen, but lawyers smell blood, and I had to handle it. I felt my stomach turn. Handle it? You buried it. You bribed inspectors and forced a settlement. He didn't deny it. That silence was its own confession. Finally, he muttered, I told Ethan to fix it. He was supposed to make her go away. She wouldn't listen, so I had him show her what kind of betrayal she'd be marrying into. It worked. You left, and you never looked back. Everyone won. My blood ran cold. Everyone? You call that winning? He smiled faintly, cruelly. You're still alive, aren't you? I took a step back, chest hollow. Alive because you destroyed my life first? He shrugged, as if I'd asked him to pass the salt. You were too naive, Ambar. I saved you from yourself. Saved me? I whispered. You killed her mother. You broke your son. You broke me. All to protect a company built on lies. For the first time, he flinched. Not from guilt, but from the truth's proximity. You don't understand, he said. People like us don't survive without getting dirty. No, I said, voice steadying. You don't survive without making everyone else dirty for you. I left before he could speak again, slamming the door so hard the blueprints trembled. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised gray, and I stood in the gravel lot, shaking so violently I thought I might throw up. The taste of metal filled my mouth. I drove back towards Seattle on autopilot, headlights slicing through rain that came down like judgment. I replayed his words. I told Ethan to fix it. Make her go away. By the time I got home, the edges of everything had blurred into one long ache. Caleb was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, wiping his hands with a towel. He turned when he saw me. How bad was it? I couldn't even sit. He admitted it, I said, voice trembling. He said it wasn't laundering, just creative bookkeeping. And then he said something worse. Caleb came closer. Worse than that? He said he told Ethan to handle Marissa, to make her go away. He didn't mean break up with her, Caleb. He meant destroy her reputation, maybe more. His jaw tensed, and he pulled me into his chest. I didn't cry. My body felt too stunned for tears. "You're safe now," he murmured. "You're not that girl anymore." But that was the problem. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. That night, as Caleb slept beside me, I lay awake, listening to the storm crawl across the windows. I thought about the necklace, the ring, the truck, all of it connected by a single thread named Raymond Cayley. I thought about Ethan, too, my brother who vanished a year after I left. Dad had said he couldn't handle the guilt. But guilt isn't a disease, it's evidence. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail. Unknown number. No message, just the familiar static hum of silence before a single breath and a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Hey, little sister. I heard you talk to Dad. You don't know everything yet. She didn't just save your company that night. She saved your life. Call me back if you want the whole truth." Ethan. My pulse froze. The storm outside broke harder. I replayed the message 3 times until the thunder drowned it out. I didn't know what scared me more, that he was alive or that he sounded sorry. I didn't sleep that night. The voicemail kept echoing through my head like a drip in a dark room. She didn't just save your company that night. She saved your life. What did that mean? Saved me from what? By sunrise, my brain was a loop of half-memories. Marissa's face lit by headlights, Ethan's voice calling my name from the porch after I vanished into the woods, my father's words. She wouldn't listen, so I had him make her go away. The rain had stopped, but everything inside me still felt flooded. Caleb found me sitting at the kitchen counter, staring at my phone like it might detonate. He poured coffee into a mug and slid it toward me without asking. "You're thinking about calling him," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He set his hand over mine. "If you do, record everything. Protect yourself first. Whatever Ethan says, you need to be prepared that it might hurt." "I've already been hurt," I whispered. "This is just post-mortem." He nodded once. No protest, no attempt to fix what couldn't be fixed. That's what I loved about him. Caleb wasn't the kind of man who filled silence with noise. He let me breathe through the collapse. By noon, I was parked outside a public library's parking lot, phone on the passenger seat, staring at the number. One tap and the past would answer. When Ethan picked up, his voice was rougher, older. "Ambar?" I almost hung up, but I didn't. "You said she saved my life. What did you mean?" A long breath. "Not over the phone. Meet me. Tomorrow. The Old Bay Motel off Highway 16, room 203, noon." "Why there?" "Because it's neutral ground, and because Dad has ears everywhere." "Ethan." He cut the line before I could finish. That night I told Caleb. He looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "He won't talk if you're there." "Then at least let me track your location," he said. "Please." I agreed, because truth-seeking shouldn't feel like preparing for a crime scene, but it did. The next day, the motel smelled like bleach and cigarettes. The carpet was threadbare, the curtains stiff. Ethan was already inside, sitting by the window, staring at the parking lot like it might judge him. He'd aged, deep lines around his mouth, a permanent shadow in his eyes. But his voice still carried the same calm authority that used to talk me out of tree branches and into trouble. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," I replied. He gestured to the chair opposite. "Then let's not waste time." Ethan's confession. He started with a story I already knew, but twisted it in ways I didn't expect. Raymond's company had been falsifying safety inspections for years, cutting corners, bribing city officials, skipping reinforcement checks on structures that needed them. When an accident killed Marissa's mother, Raymond paid investigators to pin the blame on a subcontractor who conveniently disappeared. The lawsuit was settled quietly, far below what it was worth. When Marissa started helping me with bookkeeping, she found project IDs that matched that old case. She realized my father had transferred money through my architecture startup to conceal payouts tied to the cover-up. She confronted him, Ethan said, his hands trembling. She told him she'd reopen the case and bring evidence to court. He panicked, told me to handle it. I swallowed hard. Handle it how? He said she needed to be discredited. If people thought she was unstable, obsessed, or immoral, no one would believe anything she said. My stomach twisted. That's why you got her into the truck? Yeah. He looked down, shame pressing his shoulders. I thought it would be enough to stage something awful, just enough for you to walk away, but Dad had other plans. What plans? Ethan hesitated, rubbing his jaw like the words themselves could bruise him. He said if she didn't disappear after that night, he'd make it happen himself. He wasn't bluffing, Ambar. He had people on payroll who fixed problems. I went cold. You mean? He nodded slowly. Marissa figured it out. That's why she played along. She made sure you caught us. She knew if you hated her enough, you'd leave town immediately, and Dad would think his plan worked. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. So she sacrificed herself? She saved both of us, Ethan said quietly. If she'd run, he'd have gone after her. If you'd stayed, he'd have gone after you. She made herself the villain, so he'd stop watching. I pressed my hands to my face. The motel room blurred. 6 years of resentment collapsed into something rawer. Guilt, awe, grief. All that time, I whispered. I hated her for saving me. Ethan looked at me then, eyes bloodshot. We were all pawns in his game, Ambar. The difference is, you got out. I didn't. Silence. Only the hum of the old heater filled the space. What happened after I left? I asked. He stared out the window. Dad found out I still talked to her. He cut me off. I tried to disappear. I thought if I stayed gone, he'd leave me alone too. Did he? Ethan laughed bitterly. Do you think Raymond Cayley ever lets anyone walk away clean? He slid a USB drive across the table. Everything you need to bury him. Financial records, inspection reports, bribes. All of it. You can give it to the feds or burn it. But make sure you know what you're doing, because once this gets out, there's no going back. I stared at the tiny drive, a piece of plastic smaller than a lighter, but heavy enough to crush a dynasty. Why give it to me? I asked. Because you're the only one who ever believed in right over reputation. He sighed. And because I can't carry it anymore. When I looked up, he was already standing. Take care of yourself, little sister. And thank Marissa if you ever see her again. She's the only reason either of us is still breathing. He left without looking back. That night, I drove home in silence, the USB drive burning a hole in my pocket. Caleb was waiting by the window when I walked in. He didn't ask questions at first, just opened his arms. I broke then, quietly, against his chest. She didn't cheat, I said through tears. She saved my life. He didn't say I told you so, he just whispered, so what now? I pulled the drive from my coat pocket. Now, I make sure Dad never hurts anyone again. Caleb nodded, eyes fierce. Then we do it right. In that moment, I realized I wasn't alone in this anymore. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something borrowed. It felt like something I could rebuild. But I also knew the truth always costs something, and I hadn't yet paid my full price. 2 days later, I found myself standing outside the Tacoma Federal Courthouse, clutching the USB drive like a live grenade. The air felt heavy, wet with the kind of gray drizzle that makes everything smell like old steel and broken promises. Caleb waited in the car across the street, engine running, watching me through the windshield. He didn't say it out loud, but we both knew what this meant. The end of my father's empire, the end of whatever family still existed between us. Inside, the federal agent looked tired but alert. When I slid the USB across the desk and said my father's name, his brows rose just slightly. He didn't ask how I'd gotten it. Maybe he already knew. Maybe the FBI had been waiting for someone to hand them a missing puzzle piece that only I could deliver. By the time I walked back outside, the air felt cleaner somehow, lighter. But guilt is clever. It never really leaves. It just changes shape. That night, Caleb and I sat on the couch with the lights off. The only illumination came from the TV, muted news highlights of a developing investigation into construction safety fraud in Pierce County. No names yet, but I knew. We both knew. Do you think they'll arrest him? Caleb asked softly. Yes. And do you think that'll fix it? I hesitated. No, but maybe it'll stop the bleeding. He reached for my hand, thumb tracing small circles against my skin. You don't owe him anything anymore. I know, I said, though a small, traitorous part of me still ached for the father I thought I had. The one who built cabins and told ghost stories by lantern light. The one who didn't exist. 3 nights later, I received an email from Marissa. Subject, you did it, didn't you? I saw the news. I can breathe again for the first time in years. Thank you, Ambar. I don't know if I ever said it, but I'm sorry for everything you had to carry because of me. None of it was fair. Take care of yourself, M. I stared at it for a long time, then hit reply and typed only, "You saved me. That's not something I forget." I didn't send it. I just saved it to drafts. Some truths don't need an audience, just acknowledgement. The following morning, my phone rang again. Unknown caller. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. Ambar, a voice said, gravelly, familiar. Ethan? Dad knows, he said flatly. They're coming for him tonight, but he's not going quietly. Be careful. What do you mean, coming for him? But the line clicked dead before he answered. I felt my throat tighten. Caleb looked up from the kitchen, reading my expression. What is it? It's Ethan. He said Dad knows. He sounded scared. Within an hour, the local news flashed breaking footage. Local construction mogul Raymond Cayley hospitalized after confrontation at Tacoma office. The report was fragmented. Something about an attempted escape, an altercation with law enforcement, a possible heart issue. My stomach twisted as the images flickered. The office parking lot I'd stood in just days ago, now crawling with sirens and red-blue light. Caleb muted the TV. You don't have to watch this, he said gently. Yes, I whispered. I do. Later that night, I drove back to the cabin, the same one where it had all started. The porch light was still broken. The pine trees loomed, wet and whispering. I stood where I'd once sat for hours, the night before my wedding that never was, the same place where my life had split down the middle. In my pocket was the pendant, my mother's necklace. Marissa had mailed it to me earlier that afternoon, wrapped in brown paper with no note. Just the return address crossed out in pen. I held it up to the moonlight. The tiny diamond caught the reflection of the cabin windows, and for a moment it looked like a small, trembling star. It wasn't just jewelry, it was proof of love, of lies, of everything we inherited that we never asked for. I heard the crunch of gravel behind me and turned. Ethan stood there, drenched from the rain. His eyes were bloodshot, but his voice was calm. He's gone, he said simply. I froze. Dad? He nodded. Heart attack. In custody. It's over. But the way he said it, tired, hollow, made me realize over didn't mean finished. I didn't want him dead, I said. I know. He looked at the trees, the mist curling around the cabin roof. But people like him never stop themselves. Someone always has to pull the plug. We stood in silence, the rain pattering like applause we didn't deserve. Marissa sent me this, I said finally, showing him the pendant. You should have it. He shook his head. No, it was Mom's. It belongs to the only one of us who didn't lose their soul trying to please him. I almost smiled. Almost. Where will you go? I asked. Anywhere but here, he said, starting back toward his car. Then he turned, one hand on the door. You got your life back, Ambar. Don't waste it by looking backward. And then he was gone again, the same way he left 6 years ago, swallowed by headlights and distance. When I got home that night, Caleb was asleep on the couch, one arm over his eyes, the lamp still on. I sat beside him, quietly, and whispered into the dark, It's done. But even as I said it, I knew closure wasn't something you found. It was something you built, piece by piece, until the ghost grew small enough to live with. The next morning, the world looked different. My inbox was flooded with reporters' questions, legal notices, and court subpoenas I'd have to forward to the attorneys now handling the fallout. But through all the noise, one email stood out. From Marissa Lane, subject, goodbye. I'm leaving Seattle for good. Portland, maybe. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere with light that doesn't hurt. You were brave, Ambar. Braver than I was. Thank you for finishing what I couldn't. I replied this time. I didn't finish it. You did. I just made sure people heard the truth. Be safe. When I hit send, the ache in my chest didn't vanish, but it shifted from grief to something close to peace. Still, one thought lingered as I stared out the window at the sun rising over Seattle's skyline. If Marissa hadn't walked into that bar again, if Caleb hadn't believed me, if Ethan hadn't called, I might have married a man who never knew the truth about the woman standing beside him. And that would have been the real tragedy. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, postponed, not canceled. I remember standing behind the closed chapel doors, hearing the soft hum of music on the other side, feeling a kind of peace I hadn't known existed. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was true. When the doors opened, sunlight spilled across the aisle, and there was Caleb, waiting. Not to fix me, not to rescue me, but to walk with me. My steps felt heavy at first, then lighter, each one carrying me farther from the version of myself who once mistook silence for safety. When I reached him, he whispered, "You look like you finally exhaled." "I did," I said, and meant it. The ceremony was simple, intimate. No extravagant flowers, no glittering chandeliers. Just the people who had stayed, and the promise that what we built from here on would be honest. During my vows, my voice wavered, but I didn't hide the cracks. I used to think love meant protection, keeping the bad parts buried so no one could get hurt. But real love, I said, glancing at Caleb, means pulling the truth into the light, even when it blinds you. Because love that survives the truth, that's the kind that lasts. He squeezed my hands, and in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, a beginning earned. After the ceremony, we didn't have a big reception, just a dinner with close friends and quiet laughter. No one mentioned my father, or Ethan, or the trial that had started that very morning in Tacoma. But as I stepped outside for air, I saw a small package on the hood of our car, wrapped in brown paper and twine. No name, no note. Inside was a photograph, the cabin, glowing under moonlight. In the corner, a signature, M.L. Marissa. The picture was beautiful, peaceful, almost like she was saying goodbye the only way she knew how, through her lens. I smiled, tears burning hot, then tucked the photo into my clutch beside the pendant. 2 pieces of the past that no longer felt like anchors, but reminders. 3 months later, Raymond Cayley Construction officially collapsed under the weight of federal charges: fraud, safety violations, bribery. His name was stripped from every building, every plaque. My father, once the man who measured his worth in steel and concrete, now waited for trial in a hospital ward, his empire reduced to rubble and receipts. Ethan disappeared again, leaving no forwarding address, only a voicemail that said, "Keep doing what's right, even when no one claps for it." I didn't delete it. Life after the storm was quiet, unnervingly so at first. I still ran my design firm, but something inside me had shifted. I began donating part of our profits to a legal fund for families affected by construction negligence. Every time I signed a check, I thought of Marissa's mother, of all the names erased by men like Raymond who thought money could buy silence. Caleb supported it without hesitation. "You're turning pain into purpose," he said. "That's the real legacy." Sometimes, when the city lights flicker across the glass walls of my office, I catch my reflection and almost don't recognize the woman staring back. She looks older, steadier. Someone who's learned that closure doesn't mean forgetting. It means refusing to carry someone else's guilt forever. A year later, I visited the cabin one last time. The pines had grown thicker. The porch sagged a little, but the air still smelled of cedar and memory. I placed my mother's pendant on the old railing and whispered, "It's yours again." Then I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo, the last one I'd ever take there. When I looked at the picture later, I noticed something strange. The light had caught just right, and the pendant's reflection formed a small, soft star in the corner of the frame, almost identical to the one in Marissa's photo. Maybe coincidence, maybe something else. Either way, I smiled. That night, I posted a final message on the same storytelling forum where people once followed my anonymous updates through heartbreak and revelation. Final update from Ambar. The truth cost me my family, but it gave me my life back. I learned that some betrayals are really sacrifices in disguise, and that sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself walk out free. If you ever find yourself staring at a truth that could destroy you, remember this: the destruction is just the sound of something false collapsing. What's left is real. AC. When I hit post, I closed the tab, shut the laptop, and finally let the silence mean peace, not avoidance. Caleb came up behind me, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. I smiled. That sometimes the people who break us are the ones who build us better, just not in the way they intended. He kissed the top of my head. Then here's to being rebuilt. And under the soft hum of evening, for the first time in years, I believed him.